He thought his canine partner was gone forever, until a routine traffic stop takes an unexpected turn when a police officer pulls over a speeding vet, only to see the dog he thought he'd lost forever sitting in the passenger seat next to a stranger. What happened to Max, and why was he with a vet? Officer Daniels had long accepted that Max, his loyal canine partner, was never coming back. He'd buried the pain, locked away the memories, and stopped looking, until one routine traffic stop changed everything. Max wasn't just a pet, he was a partner, a protector, a brother, the kind of companion you don't just work with, you live with, you breathe with, you depend on when your own instincts fail you. Officer Daniels didn't adopt Max, he earned Max. Max was one of the sharpest K9s the department had ever trained, a German shepherd with eyes like steel and a heart like gold. He was disciplined, alert, fearless, but somehow still gentle when it mattered. Kids would run up to him at community events, and Max would drop his guard completely, letting toddlers tug on his ears while parents watched nervously. Daniels would laugh and tell them, "Don't worry, he only bites if you're hiding something." Max had saved lives, real lives. He had sniffed out drugs, disarmed suspects, and once even found a missing child in a freezing forest after 12 hours of searching. Daniels had watched Max push through terrain so rough it tore at his pads, refusing to give up until the child was found huddled beneath a rotting log, shaking from the cold. 6 years of service, 6 years of trust, 6 years of walking into danger together, side by side, and then one night, everything changed. It started with a noise complaint. Nothing unusual, just a call about something odd going on in an abandoned warehouse on the edge of town. A couple of teenagers claimed they heard shouting, maybe even a gunshot, but it was probably just echoes bouncing off the concrete. Or so Daniels had assumed. It was late, nearly midnight. The streets were quiet, moonlight dancing across the damp pavement. Daniels had Max in the back of the SUV, as always. He wasn't required to bring him for something like this, but it was habit by now. Max went everywhere with him. They were a unit. The warehouse loomed in the distance like a ghost. Windows shattered, rust dripping from the doors like blood. Daniels radioed in that he was checking it out. What he didn't know was that this wasn't some teenage prank or echo. It was a trap. Inside that warehouse were 4 suspects, armed, desperate, and cornered after a string of robberies. They had been hiding there for days, paranoid and unpredictable. The shouting the teens heard, that was them arguing over whether to run or hold their ground. Daniels approached cautiously, flashlight in one hand, the other near his holster. He didn't even have time to react when the first shot rang out. It came from behind a stack of pallets. Just a flash, a crack, and then pain, sharp and blinding, shot through his leg. He dropped hard, gritting his teeth, trying to crawl to cover. In the scramble, Daniels managed to press his panic button and shout into the radio for backup. Sirens lit up the sky minutes later, but by then, the damage was done. Max had been barking furiously from the back seat, sensing something was wrong. And somehow, amidst the chaos, the doors opened. It wasn't clear who did it. Maybe a suspect trying to flee. Maybe a rookie cop who arrived late and panicked. But the back door of the patrol SUV swung open, and Max bolted. He wasn't running away. He was running toward the danger. Toward Daniels. The last thing Daniels remembered clearly was Max's shape darting into the darkness. A low growl rippling through the night, followed by more shots, and then silence. When the dust settled, the suspects were gone. They had slipped through a hidden exit at the back, scattering into the night. Officers found Daniels bleeding but alive, his vest soaked in sweat. They stabilized him, hauled him to the hospital. But Max was gone. The department thought he had chased the suspects. It made sense. Max was trained to pursue, to protect, to do whatever it took to neutralize a threat. So that's what he did. Only he never came back. At first, everyone believed they'd find him. Officers combed the area. Helicopters circled overhead with floodlights sweeping through alleyways. They brought in other K9 units to try and pick up his scent. Flyers were printed. Social media posts shared. Tips came in, but nothing panned out. Hours turned into days. Days into a week. No sightings. No clues. No Max. And Daniels, he unraveled. It wasn't just the injury. His leg would heal. But the whole Max left? That was different. He stopped showing up at the station, ignored calls. His home, once neatly kept, began to fall apart. He didn't eat much, slept even less. Every little noise outside, every bark in the distance, he'd jolt awake, rushing to the window, hoping, praying it was Max. It never was. People said all the right things. He's in a better place. He was a hero. You gave him a good life. But none of that helped. because none of that answered the only question that haunted Daniels. What happened to Max? It wasn't knowing he was gone that hurt the most. It was not knowing if he was suffering, if he was injured, if he tried to get home and couldn't, if someone had taken him. That thought, that maybe Max hadn't died in that warehouse, that maybe someone had stolen him, dug into Daniels like a rusted blade. It wasn't unheard of. Retired K9s had been kidnapped before, some for revenge, some for resale, some for reasons far darker. And Max wasn't retired. He was in his prime. It started with nightmares. Daniels would see flashes. Max locked in a cage somewhere, beaten, muzzled, eyes dull and lifeless. Other nights, he saw Max chasing after shadows in an endless maze of streets, limping, wounded, whimpering, always alone, always just out of reach. Daniels would wake up drenched in sweat, heart hammering in his chest. He couldn't let it go, so he started his own investigation. The department had already closed the case. Officially, Max was presumed lost in the line of duty, disappeared in action. A memorial was held in the park where Max used to train. Officers lined up, saluted a folded flag, and placed a photo of Max on a pedestal like a tombstone. But Daniels didn't attend. He couldn't, because in his heart, something didn't sit right, and that feeling only grew stronger. He started combing through every piece of footage from that night. Security cameras, traffic cams, body cam footage. He went frame by frame, studying angles, looking for anything that might show where Max went after he disappeared into that warehouse. And then he found it. It was a grainy image, caught by a traffic camera 2 blocks away from a scene, about 15 minutes after the shooting stopped. A shadow, a figure, 4 legs, a tail, a dog, running full speed across an intersection, heading toward the city outskirts. Daniels froze. The timestamp matched, the shape matched, and in that split second, despite the blur, he swore. He saw the glint of Max's collar. He printed the frame and pinned it to his wall. Max had survived. Now Daniels needed to find him. The problem was, he was alone in it. His captain told him to rest. The doctor said his leg needed months to recover. His partner, a rookie named Green, tried to talk him out of it. "You're chasing ghosts, man," Green said. "He's gone. He's not out there." Daniels didn't reply. He just looked at the photo again. And then he packed a bag. The next few weeks became a blur. Daniels visited every vet clinic, every animal shelter, every rescue center within a 50-mile radius. He handed out flyers, talked to street vendors, listened to homeless folks who might have seen something others didn't. Every lead pulled him deeper into a spiral. One man claimed he'd seen a dog matching Max's description on the outskirts of a rail yard, scavenging for food. Daniel spent 3 nights there, limping between rusted containers, calling Max's name until his voice went hoarse. Nothing. Another woman said she saw someone shoving a dog into the back of a black van near the docks. Daniels traced every registered black van in the area, showing up at people's doors, some polite, some less so. Still nothing. He refused to give up. He couldn't, because in every corner of his soul, he believed Max was still out there, trapped, injured, maybe even in someone's hands, maybe used for illegal fights, maybe chained in some underground facility. The city was dark like that, beautiful in the daylight, broken in the shadows. He once met a man, an ex-cop turned private investigator, who said something that stayed with him. "You don't find lost things in the light. You find them in the places no one wants to go." So Daniels went, into alleyways that smelled of despair, into clubs where blood money flowed like beer, into basements that stank of gasoline and guilt. And every time he thought he was getting close, every time a lead sparked something inside him, it fizzled into silence. And yet, he kept going, until something happened, something small. A teenager on a skateboard, no older than 16, spotted the flyer in Daniel's hand and said, "Hey, I saw that dog, about a week ago, near the old silo." Daniels nearly dropped the paper. "You're sure?" he asked, his voice tight, throat dry. The kid shrugged. "Yeah, I was tagging walls." He was just standing there, looking at me. Then he ran off, looked beat up but fast, had a limp. Daniels' breath caught. His leg. Max had probably been hit that night. The silo was on the far side of the city, an abandoned industrial zone no one had used in years. Daniels had checked near there before, but hadn't gone deep. Not all the way. That night he did. The rain was coming down hard. Mud clung to his boots. Every step felt like wading through concrete. But he didn't stop. The silo was a skeleton of rust and time. Long hallways, collapsed beams, cold air that smelled like copper and mold. He called Max's name. Nothing. He tried again. Still silence. And just as he was about to turn back, thinking maybe the kid had been wrong, he heard it, the faintest shuffle, like paws on gravel. Daniels froze. Then he whispered, "Max." A low, hesitant whimper echoed from the shadows. He turned slowly, eyes scanning, and then he saw them. Two glowing eyes, hidden behind a fallen beam, watching, cautious, not fearful, but not trusting either. Then a low growl, familiar, protective. "Max," Daniels choked. His voice cracked. "It's me." The dog stepped forward, slowly, limping, covered in dirt, ribs visible beneath matted fur. His ears were torn, his collar was frayed, one eye swollen shut, but it was him. It was Max. And in that moment, neither of them moved. Daniels dropped to his knees, tears mingling with rain, arms open. Max hesitated for just a second longer, then bolted forward, crashing into him like a storm. They didn't need words, didn't need explanations. The sound Max made, the sob in his throat, the way he buried his face into Daniel's chest, that was enough. It had been weeks, but to them, it felt like home, and that was only the beginning. Cole took a slow sip of his tea, then set the cup down gently. His fingers tapped once on the side of the mug, a nervous habit maybe. His voice was steady, but there was a weight in it. It was 7 months ago, right after that huge storm rolled through the outskirts near Belmont Ridge. Roads were blocked, trees down. I was driving back from a mobile vet clinic I'd set up, volunteering for rescue efforts. I took a dirt road shortcut, not official, just something I knew from growing up in the area. Daniels leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly together. I saw movement on the side of the road, Cole continued. At first, I thought it was a coyote. You know, the way they limp when they're injured. But when I got closer, I realized it was a dog, a big one. He was limping bad, looked half-starved, covered in mud. Daniel stared at him, his throat tightening. That image, it was hard to imagine Max like that. Max had always been strong, proud, clean and sharp in his K9 vest, ready for action, not lost and broken on a country road. I pulled over and opened the door slowly, Cole said. Didn't want to scare him. I was surprised. He didn't growl, didn't bark, just stared at me, like he was trying to figure out if he could trust me. What happened next? Daniels asked, his voice low. I grabbed a protein bar from my pack and knelt down, tossed it gently his way. He sniffed it, then limped over and ate it. That's when I saw the gash on his leg. It looked old, infected, probably from barbed wire or a fight. He collapsed right there, just inches from my boots. Cole paused, eyes distant now. I couldn't just leave him. Took him to my clinic, patched him up. Took days for him to stabilize. Weeks before he trusted me enough to let me touch him without flinching. Daniels clenched his jaw. He must have been so scared. Cole nodded slowly. Yeah, but also patient, like he'd seen worse, like he'd survived worse. Daniels whispered, because he had. Cole leaned back, his hands resting in his lap. I wasn't sure if he was abandoned or just a stray. No collar, no chip. I scanned him at least 10 times over the first week, thinking maybe I missed something. Nothing. Daniel's heart sank. Max had been chipped. The department made sure of that. He was chipped, Daniels said quietly. He had to be. I believe you, Cole replied. But I swear on everything. I scanned him every day. My scanner picked up nothing. Daniels furrowed his brow. Maybe it got damaged, maybe in the gunfire, or someone removed it. Cole added darkly. It's rare, but it happens. Dogs used in operations. K9S. They're targeted. Some people know how to strip a chip clean out of a dog. Daniel's stomach turned. The thought of Max being captured, injured, mutilated, it was unbearable. I couldn't report him, Cole said. I didn't know who he belonged to. I checked lost pet boards, Facebook groups, local shelters. Nothing matched. And he never barked, never howled, just watched, like he was waiting for something. Daniels looked down at his hands. He was waiting for me. The silence stretched for a moment before Cole continued. After a few weeks, I called him Shadow, because that's what he was. He'd follow me from room to room, never made a sound. He'd sleep by the door every night, like he was guarding it. He never played, never fetched a toy, never acted like a normal dog. That's because he wasn't, Daniel said. He was trained, disciplined. I figured. Cole nodded. Took me 3 tries to get him to eat from a regular dog bowl. He was used to commands, structure. I just didn't know where he came from. Daniel's voice cracked. He was mine. Cole looked him in the eyes. Then I think he's been waiting for this moment. Daniels turned toward the living room where Max, no, Shadow, was curled up by the fireplace. His eyes were open, watching them, listening. Daniels stood slowly. Can I try something? Cole nodded. Go ahead. Daniels took a deep breath and walked toward Max. Max, he said softly. The dog didn't move. Max, come. The ears twitched. The head lifted slightly. Max, heel. That's when it happened. Max stood. He didn't rush, didn't bark. He simply stood up, took 2 slow steps forward, and sat right beside Daniel's leg, just like he used to during training, just like old times. Daniels dropped to his knees. His hand trembled as he reached out and touched Max's head, and Max let out the softest, low whine, almost like a sigh of relief. Daniels buried his face in Max's fur. I thought I lost you, buddy. I thought you were gone. Max leaned into him. Cole stood in the doorway, arms crossed, eyes glassy. I didn't know. I swear. Daniels nodded, still holding Max. I believe you. Over the next few weeks, Daniels visited the clinic more often, each time struggling with the same question. Should he take Max back? After all, Max had been his partner for years. He had been there through the worst and the best of Daniel's life, loyal to the core, always by his side. The bond they shared couldn't be described in simple words. But Cole had a point. Max had clearly found a home in the clinic, and more importantly, a new protector. He was different. He wasn't the dog Daniels had once known. He was now a companion to a man who had given him a second chance at life. And maybe, just maybe, Max was content. One evening, Daniel sat in his truck outside the clinic, watching Max through the glass windows. The dog was laying at Cole's feet, his head tilted slightly, ears perked as if he were listening to every word the vet was saying. There was no urgency in his posture, no frantic need to run to Daniels. He was settled, and that hurt. Daniels had to make a decision. He'd been trying to hold onto the past, trying to pick up the pieces of a life that had shattered 3 years ago. But maybe it was time to move forward, to let Max live his new life. The thought stung, like a sharp cut that wouldn't heal. How do you say goodbye to a piece of yourself? That night, Daniels made a choice. He would visit one more time. He would say his final goodbye, give Max the space he deserved, and walk away. For the first time in months, he felt a sense of peace, a fragile peace, but peace nonetheless. The next morning, Daniels arrived at the clinic, just as the sun began to rise. It was cold, the kind of cold that made your breath visible in the air. The clinic was quiet, the only sound being the soft whir of the heating system and the distant rustle of leaves outside. Daniels walked inside, his boots making the familiar click on the tile floor. Max was lying in his usual spot, next to Cole's desk, his head resting on the ground. He raised his head as Daniels entered, those brown eyes locking with his for a brief moment. Daniels swallowed hard, his throat tight. He could feel the weight of every moment he had spent with Max, the bond that had been built over years of service. He wanted to reach out, to pull Max into his arms like old times, but he held back, unsure whether he had the right to. Max, Daniels said, his voice barely above a whisper. I don't know if you remember everything we've been through, but I hope you know, you were more than just a dog. You were family. Max stood slowly, stretching his legs before walking toward Daniels. He sniffed at his hands, his tail giving a subtle wag. The soft whine that escaped his throat made Daniels' heart ache. I wish I could take you home, buddy. I really do, Daniels continued, rubbing Max behind the ears as he knelt down. But I see how happy you are here. You deserve that, and I think I need to accept that you've moved on. Max sat down in front of him, looking up at him with those eyes that had seen so much, eyes that had stood by Daniels through it all. Daniels smiled faintly, though it was strained. You've got a good home here. You've got someone who loves you, who'll take care of you. There was a long pause. Then Daniels stood, his legs feeling heavier with every movement. He felt like he was leaving a piece of his soul behind. But as he turned toward the door, something unexpected happened. Max walked beside him. Max, Daniels murmured, surprised. What are you? But before he could finish, Max nudged his hand, gently, persistently. There was something there, a connection that hadn't broken, that hadn't faded. Max didn't want him to go. He wanted to stay with him. Daniels paused, his breath catching in his chest. Daniel stood there, stunned, as Max nudged his hand once again. It wasn't forceful. It wasn't urgent. It was calm, almost comforting, as if the dog were telling him that he had a choice to make, and that choice was here, right now. Max looked up at Daniels with those familiar brown eyes, the same eyes that had been his partner in every tough situation, that had protected him when danger was at its worst, the same eyes that Daniels had longed to see again for the past 3 years. I don't deserve you, Daniels muttered, his voice cracking slightly. I don't deserve you after everything that happened. Max tilted his head, as if to question him. Daniel swallowed, feeling the weight of his words settle deep into his chest. I abandoned you, Max. I let you go, thinking you were gone. I thought I could move on. Max let out a small, soft bark, as if to say, "Stop blaming yourself." And in that moment, Daniels understood. Max hadn't been abandoned. He hadn't been lost. He had simply been waiting for the right moment to come back into his life. The memories rushed back. Each mission, each victory, and each heartbreaking moment they had shared. Max was more than a partner. He was his family, his confidant, his protector. Daniels turned and walked back toward the door, knowing that this moment was slipping through his fingers. But Max followed, without hesitation, without fear. "Max," Daniels whispered, his voice trembling as he stepped toward the exit. "You can't come with me." Max stopped at the door and barked once, sharply, loud enough to echo in the small clinic. The sound hit Daniels like a wave. He felt his knees buckle slightly as the full weight of the situation slammed into him. Max wasn't just any dog. He was a part of him. Max's bark wasn't a command. It wasn't a plea for attention. It was a declaration that they weren't done, that their bond wasn't broken, not in the way Daniels thought it had been. Daniels stood in the doorway for what seemed like forever, feeling the tension build between them. He wanted to walk away. He wanted to leave Max here and move on with his life, as painful as it was. But Max wasn't letting him go, not without a fight. And then, Max did something unexpected. He walked toward Daniels and nuzzled his side, his eyes full of trust. The dog's breath was steady, his presence familiar. That was when it hit Daniels. It wasn't just Max waiting for him all these years. He'd been waiting for Max to realize something. Max wasn't just a K9. He wasn't just a partner. He was a reminder that there are things worth fighting for. And Daniels knew, deep down, that he hadn't been truly living without Max. "All right, Max," Daniels said softly, his heart pounding in his chest. He reached down and placed his hand on the dog's back. "We're not done, are we?" Max looked up at him, his tail wagging just slightly. Daniels let out a sigh of relief, his chest tightening with emotion. The weight of the past few years, the guilt, the loss, seemed to lift in that instant. "I'm sorry for everything," Daniels whispered, his hand running through Max's fur. "I should have never let you go." Max gave a soft bark, as if to say, "It's okay. We're here now." The car ride back to the precinct felt like a dream. Daniels kept glancing at Max, who sat quietly in the passenger seat, his head resting against the door. The world outside seemed to blur in the rearview mirror, just like the fog of emotions Daniels had been living in for the past 3 years. It wasn't just the relief of finding Max again. It was the sudden weight of everything he had lost during those years without him. The loss of purpose, the feeling of betrayal that haunted him every night he lay awake in bed. But Max had always been his anchor, even in the darkest of times. "I don't know if I'm ready for this," Daniels muttered, his grip tightening on the steering wheel. Max glanced at him, those soulful eyes, silently communicating something deeper. "Yes, you are." Max had never once given up on him, even when Daniels thought the world had turned its back. The drive was quiet, save for the soft sound of Max's breathing. The car seemed to be filled with unspoken words, with the kind of tension that only years of separation could create. But in the silence, Daniels felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. As they pulled up to the precinct, Daniels' mind raced. He knew the department would have questions. They would be curious about how Max had turned up after all this time, why he was with a veterinarian, and why now. But Daniels didn't have answers for them. He didn't care to have them. When Max jumped out of the car, his tail wagging slightly, Daniels couldn't help but smile. He looked down at the dog, the one who had been there for him through everything. But it wasn't just about the past anymore. It was about the future. Inside the precinct, the atmosphere was tense. Daniel's colleagues stood by their desks, talking in hushed tones. The moment Max walked in, everything shifted. The silence that filled the room wasn't just about surprise. It was about something more profound. A sense of disbelief. A sense of awe. Daniels walked past his fellow officers, his eyes fixed on the dog at his side. Max's familiar presence was both comforting and unnerving. He couldn't explain how it felt to see his partner again after all this time. "Officer Daniels, is that really?" one of the officers began, his voice tripping over the words. "It's him," Daniels replied, his voice steady but emotional. He looked at Max and then back at the officers. "I thought I lost him. I thought I failed him. But now I know he never gave up on me." The officers exchanged confused glances. Daniels had always been the strong one, the one who kept things together no matter how difficult things got. But this reunion was different. This wasn't just a return of a missing K9. It was the return of a bond that had been broken, but never truly lost. "Daniels, you okay?" the sergeant asked, a rare softness in his voice. "I'm more than okay," Daniels replied quietly. "I'm finally home." But the questions didn't stop. They couldn't. the mystery of where Max had been, who had been caring for him, and why it had taken so long for them to reunite, hung in the air like an unanswered prayer. Dr. Aaron Cole, Daniels muttered under his breath, the name of the veterinarian who had been caring for Max. It wasn't a name he was familiar with, but something about it felt like a piece of the puzzle Daniels still hadn't figured out. He'd have to track down the vet and hear the full story. But for now, he could only look at Max. The bond between them had never been more clear. Daniel's shift ended late that night, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he was still chasing something. He needed answers. He needed to know why Max had been gone for so long, how he had ended up with Dr. Aaron Cole, and what had happened during those months apart. Daniels pulled out his phone and searched for the name. It didn't take long to find the vet's contact information. The number rang once, then twice, before a calm voice answered. "Dr. Cole," the vet said. "Dr. Cole, I'm Officer Daniels." Daniels replied, his voice steady. "I need to know how you ended up with my dog. I need the whole story." There was a brief pause on the other end of the line. "I thought you'd call," Dr. Cole said quietly. "I've been waiting for this." The words hit Daniels like a punch to the gut. Waiting for this? What did that mean? "Meet me tomorrow," Dr. Cole said. "I think it's time you hear the full story. All of it." Daniels felt a mixture of anticipation and dread settle in his stomach. The truth, whatever it was finally coming. And for better or for worse, he was ready to hear it. The next morning, Daniel sat in his car outside a small, quiet cafe on the edge of town. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a soft glow on the city streets. He had spent the entire night thinking about what Dr. Cole might reveal. What could possibly explain Max's disappearance? Why had the vet been involved in all of this? Daniels had never been one to speculate. He believed in facts, in evidence. But this was different. Max was more than a partner to him. He was family, and every moment spent without him felt like a part of his soul had been ripped away. Now, Max was back, but there were still so many unanswered questions, and Daniels needed closure. He needed to know what had happened, once and for all. A figure approached the cafe, walking with purpose. Dr. Aaron Cole. He wore a simple jacket and jeans, his expression calm, but there was a weight in his eyes that told Daniels this wasn't just about a dog. This was something bigger. "Officer Daniels," Dr. Cole greeted him with a firm handshake. "Thank you for meeting me." Daniels nodded, but his mind was racing. "Let's get to it," he said, his voice low. They sat at a table by the window, the morning light casting long shadows across the room. Dr. Cole ordered coffee, but Daniels didn't feel like drinking. His stomach was too tight, too full of anxiety. "I'm sure you have a lot of questions," Dr. Cole began, his voice steady, but tinged with something Daniels couldn't place. "And I'll give you answers, but you need to know something before we go any further." Daniels leaned forward. "Go on." Dr. Cole took a deep breath. "Max didn't just disappear, Daniels. He wasn't lost. He was taken." Daniels felt his chest tighten. "Taken? What the hell do you mean?" The vet's gaze shifted, as if weighing his next words carefully. 3 years ago, a group of people approached me. They were looking for a highly trained canine, and they were willing to pay a lot of money to get one. Daniels felt his blood run cold. "Are you telling me that someone stole Max?" Dr. Cole nodded slowly. "Yes, I wasn't part of their plan. I didn't know they were dangerous. I thought they were legitimate. They had the right resources. But when I realized what was happening, it was too late. Max had been taken." Daniel's heart pounded in his chest. This wasn't just about an animal being lost. This was about something far more sinister. Max hadn't run away. He had been kidnapped. Who were they? Daniels demanded. "Who took him?" Dr. Cole shook his head. "I don't know their names. They kept things very secretive. They had a network, a kind of underground operation. They were working with people in high places, which is why it took so long for anyone to realize Max was gone." Daniels felt his stomach churn. "Why didn't you come forward sooner? Why didn't you tell me?" "I didn't know what to do," Dr. Cole said, his voice quiet. "I was afraid. They made it clear they were watching me, and they warned me not to say anything. They knew I was a vet. They knew I had access to trained dogs like Max. They had their eyes on a few other K9s too. But Max was special. He was exactly what they needed." Daniels clenched his fists, his thoughts spinning. What did they want with him? Why take him in the first place? "That's where things get complicated," Dr. Cole continued, his voice lowering. "I don't know the full extent of their plans, but I do know that they were using Max for something dangerous. They wanted him for a covert operation. They planned to use him for illegal activities, drug smuggling, weapons tracking, things that would require a K9 of his caliber." Daniels felt his blood run cold. This wasn't just about the disappearance of a beloved partner. This was about a criminal operation that had exploited Max for their own gain. "Why are you telling me this now?" Daniels asked, his voice shaky with a mixture of rage and confusion. After all this time, Dr. Cole looked down at his coffee cup, then back at Daniels. "Because they're coming after him again." Daniels' eyes widened. "What? They found out he's alive," Dr. Cole said, his voice low and urgent. "They've been tracking him, and they know he's with you now. They won't stop until they get him back." Daniels' mind raced, his heart pounding in his chest. The reality of what was happening hit him like a freight train. This wasn't just about getting Max back. This was about protecting him from the people who had used him for their own gain. And Daniels would be damned if he let them take Max again. "I won't let them take him," Daniels said, his voice firm. "I won't let them hurt him again." Dr. Cole nodded, his expression serious. "We have to be careful. They'll stop at nothing to get him back. But I'll help you. We can't let them win." Daniels didn't sleep that night. He couldn't. The weight of everything he had learned about Max's past, the dark secrets, the criminal network, the danger they were both facing, kept him awake, his thoughts spinning in endless circles. Max had been through so much. The bond they had wasn't just one of duty, it was one of survival. And now, Max wasn't just a partner, he was a target. Daniels had always prided himself on his ability to protect and serve. But now, he was fighting for something far more personal than he had ever imagined. He was fighting for Max. The next day, he met with his team. They discussed their options, weighing the risks and potential outcomes. But one thing was clear, they had to act quickly. The criminals who had taken Max weren't just going to sit back and let things play out. They would come after him. And Daniels, as Daniels prepared for what lay ahead, one thing was certain, he wouldn't back down. Not now, not ever. Max had given him everything, his loyalty, his protection, his heart, and Daniels was willing to do whatever it took to protect him in return. The battle for Max's safety had just begun. The days that followed were filled with tension. Every knock on the door, every car that passed by, made Daniels' heart race. He couldn't shake the feeling that someone was always watching. He had to stay one step ahead of the people who had stolen Max, but it wasn't going to be easy. They were well organized, and Daniels had no idea who they were or where they might strike next. Max was by his side as always, but now Daniels could see the subtle changes in him. Max was more alert, more on edge. It was as though he could sense the danger too. "I'll protect you, buddy," Daniels whispered to him one night as they sat on the porch. Max nuzzled his hand, offering a comforting presence, but the unease in his eyes mirrored Daniels' own. The operation to track down the criminals was set into motion. Daniels and his team had gathered intel from every possible source, piecing together what little information they had. Dr. Cole had been a huge help, feeding them crucial details about the criminal network that had taken Max. But it wasn't enough. They needed more. They knew their time was running out. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Daniels' phone rang. It was a number he didn't recognize. His heart skipped a beat. It could be them, the criminals. He answered, his voice low and steady. "Daniels," came a familiar voice, one that made his blood run cold. "It's you," Daniels said, barely able to contain his rage. "What do you want?" The voice on the other end chuckled darkly. "We have something you want, don't we? Your precious Max." Daniels' grip tightened around the phone. "What do you want with him? Why are you doing this?" The voice paused for a moment, then replied with cold indifference. "We didn't want to take him at first, but now we've gotten what we need. You'll never see him again." Daniels' pulse quickened. "Where is he?" "That's something you'll have to find out for yourself," the voice replied. "But if you're too slow, well, you'll regret it." The line went dead. Daniels stared at the phone in his hand, his mind racing. He didn't have much time. They had Max, and they wouldn't stop until they got what they wanted. But Daniels wasn't going to let that happen. He had to act quickly. The plan was already in motion, but he couldn't wait for backup. He had to go in, alone if necessary. He turned to Max, who was sitting by the door, ears perked, sensing the urgency in the air. "We're going to get him back," Daniels whispered. Max's tail gave a single, firm thump against the floor. The location they had traced led them to an old warehouse on the outskirts of the city, an abandoned factory that had once been a hub of industrial activity, but now stood silent and forgotten. Daniels knew it well. He had patrolled these streets for years, but tonight it felt different. The familiar, quiet roads were now a battleground. Max's scent was everywhere in the air. Daniels' heart pounded in his chest as he crouched low, moving with precision. He could hear the faint rustling of footsteps ahead, the low murmur of voices. He wasn't alone anymore. Max was by his side, walking quietly as they closed in on the warehouse. The sense of danger was palpable, and Daniels knew there was no turning back now. The criminals had made their move, and they weren't going to back down. Inside the warehouse, Daniels and Max moved through the shadows. They could hear voices in the distance, familiar, menacing. Daniels' grip tightened around the handle of his gun, his breath slow and steady. Max stayed close, his eyes scanning the surroundings, every muscle in his body tensed, ready for anything. They reached the main room. There, in the dim light, was Max. But this time, he wasn't alone. A group of men stood around him, all with weapons drawn. The leader, tall, broad-shouldered, with a scar running down his face, turned and smiled when he saw Daniels. "Glad you could join us, officer," the man sneered. "We were just about to give your dog a new assignment." Daniels took a step forward, his voice cold and hard. "I don't know who you think you are, but I'm taking Max back." The leader chuckled. "You're too late. Max is part of something much bigger than you now. There's no going back." Max growled, low and menacing, his eyes locked on the leader. He was ready. Daniels didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, gun raised, heart thundering in his chest. The tension in the air was thick, as if time itself had slowed. The criminals didn't expect him to move so fast, so decisively. Without warning, Daniels shouted, "Now, Max." Max lunged at the leader, his jaws snapping with lethal precision. The chaos that followed was swift. The criminals, caught off guard, fumbled to react, but Max was too fast, too trained. He took down one man after another, his movements fluid and controlled, guided by Daniels' commands. In the heat of the moment, Daniels felt a surge of adrenaline. This was it. This was what they had been preparing for. Max was fighting with everything he had, and Daniels was right there beside him, trusting him every step of the way. The leader, seeing his men falter, turned to run, but Daniels wasn't about to let him escape. He chased after him, his breath heavy, his legs burning with the effort. He rounded a corner and saw the man trying to climb into a getaway car. "Not so fast," Daniels called out, his gun raised. He wasn't going to let this bastard slip away. The man froze, hands in the air. "You don't understand," he said, his voice trembling. "This was bigger than you, bigger than Max." Daniels' eyes narrowed. "It doesn't matter anymore. You took what was mine." Before the man could say another word, Daniels fired a single shot, the sound ringing through the night air. Max stood by Daniels' side, panting, covered in dirt and sweat, but victorious. They had won. They had taken back what was rightfully theirs. As the police arrived to clean up the mess, Daniels crouched down next to Max, his partner, his brother. "We're not done yet, buddy," he whispered, running his fingers through Max's fur. Max's tail wagged softly, as if to say, "I know." It had been a long, hard road, but Daniels had found Max again. And though their fight wasn't over, Daniels knew that he would always have his back. Together, they were unstoppable. As they walked away from the wreckage of the warehouse, Daniels couldn't help but feel a sense of peace wash over him. He had won back his family, and nothing, no one, would ever take that from him again. Max was home, with their story now complete. What lies ahead for Daniels and Max? What new challenges will they face together? The bond between them would only grow stronger, for they were more than just a cop and his K9. They were family. The morning sun broke through the clouds as Daniels and Max walked side by side toward the familiar gates of the police department. The world felt quieter now, as if a great weight had been lifted off his shoulders. For so long, Daniels had been haunted by the absence of Max, by the mystery of what had happened to him and the pain of not knowing. Now he had the answers. Max was back, and this time, nothing was going to tear them apart again. In the weeks that followed, things slowly returned to a sense of normalcy. Max, though scarred from his time away, had settled back into his role as Daniels' partner with unwavering loyalty. The bond they shared had only grown stronger. Max's eyes gleamed with the same sharp intelligence as before, his presence just as commanding. But now there was something deeper, a silent understanding between them that only they could truly comprehend. The department recognized Daniels' commitment and Max's incredible bravery. The two of them had gone through hell and come out on top, stronger than ever. The memorial that had once been held for Max was replaced with a hero's welcome, a celebration of their triumph and reunion. But even in the midst of accolades and recognition, Daniels never forgot what they had been through. It wasn't the medals or the awards that mattered. It was the fact that they had survived together. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months. Daniels' life had a rhythm again, one filled with routine patrols and quiet nights at home. Max remained at his side, always ready for whatever came next. It wasn't just the work anymore. It was the moments between the chaos, the walks in the park, the quiet evenings in the living room, Max's constant presence by his feet. There were still days when Daniels would catch himself staring at Max, remembering the times they had nearly lost each other. There were scars, emotional and physical, that would always remain, but Daniels no longer felt weighed down by them. He had found peace, a peace he hadn't thought possible. One rainy evening, as Daniels and Max were returning home after a long shift, Daniels felt a sense of nostalgia wash over him. He glanced at Max, who was curled up in the passenger seat, his eyes heavy with exhaustion, but filled with the same loyalty he'd shown that first day on the job. Daniels had always known that this moment would come, but he hadn't expected it to feel so right. They had both come so far. "I don't know how we got through it," Daniels muttered to himself, his voice barely audible over the hum of the rain. "But I'm glad we did." Max lifted his head, his tail giving a slow thump against the seat. It was as if he understood everything Daniels had said, as if they were in sync, connected in a way that only partners who had survived held together could be. Daniel smiled softly. "You've always had my back, haven't you?" Max's ears perked up at the sound of Daniel's voice, but he didn't need to say anything. He simply nuzzled his head against Daniel's arm, offering a quiet comfort. The next day, the pair found themselves on another routine call, this time involving a missing child. The fear that gripped Daniel's heart whenever they were faced with the unknown was still there, but he had learned how to keep it at bay. Max was with him, and that was all that mattered. They arrived at the scene, a local park, and Daniels immediately took charge, setting up a perimeter and organizing the search. Max, as always, was ready to track, to follow the scent trail, to lead the way. The search was tense, but Daniels knew that with Max by his side, there was nothing they couldn't handle. When they finally found the child, trembling but unharmed, Daniels felt a surge of relief flood through him. He looked down at Max, who was standing tall, his eyes steady and proud. They had done it. They had saved another life. Together, Max barked once, as if acknowledging the job well done. Daniel smiled, his heart swelling with gratitude. He didn't need any recognition. He didn't need any accolades. All that mattered was that they had each other, and that would always be enough. As the days passed, Daniels began to think about the future. He knew that his time on the force was finite. The years would continue to pass, and there would come a time when he and Max would have to part ways. But that was a thought for another day. For now, he was content. They had made it through the darkness, and together, they would face whatever came next. But the bond they shared would never fade. Not in this lifetime, and not in the next. One afternoon, Daniel stood on his porch, watching Max chase after a stick in the yard. The dog's movements were fluid, unburdened, as if he were still that eager young canine ready to tackle any challenge. Daniels couldn't help but feel a deep sense of gratitude for the journey they had shared. It had been a hard, painful road, but they had made it, and now they could finally breathe. Max stopped for a moment and looked up at Daniels, as if sensing the man's thoughts. Their eyes locked, and for a brief moment, it was as if time stood still. Daniel smiled, walking over to Max and giving him a gentle pat on the head. "You're not just my partner, Max. You're my family, always." Max leaned into the touch, his tail wagging lazily. And in that quiet, simple moment, Daniels knew that everything he had gone through, every battle, every loss, every heartbreak, had been worth it, because he had found something greater than all of that. He had found home. This marks the end of Daniels and Max's journey, a story of love, loss, redemption, and the unbreakable bond between a man and his dog. Their story is one of countless others, a testament to the silent strength found in loyalty and companionship. If you love Max and Daniel's incredible journey, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and stay tuned for more heartwarming stories. See you in the next video.